Malcolm, you want to pick up on something?
I did want to pick a couple of points. Firstly, by the way, John and I have been friends for about 30 to 40 years, and we've been fighting this issue for that length of time.
That's why I sat way in between you.
And I think John lived a dream world, and I lived in the practical world for 20 years of having, on behalf of a road sector, I was in the Department of Transport in those days, with the Treasury to get money for roads. And John, one thing he's right, there was a case then of either tolls or no roads, simple as that. There was no way that we were going to be given the money. I'm not going to go into all the machinations of a previous government and where all the money went. But assuming, first, there's a lot of assumptions, but assuming you had adequate levy on fuel, you had the right price, assuming all the money would come in, assuming that it was accepted that it must be ring-fenced, which no government in the world likes, no Treasury likes, no Treasury official likes. Engineers love it, ring-fencing of funds. Assuming that's true, John talks about the fuel tax, the fuel levy being equitable. It's not necessarily true. 80 to 90% probably of damage to our roads comes from heavy vehicles, including the overloads, at least that amount. Gerard will tell you all sorts of stories about what traffic congestion caused by heavy vehicles. Every time you ride on the freeway, every time you go to Durban, there's a truck falling over somewhere. You can't guarantee you're going to get to Durban and there's a truck falling over. I live in Durban. I've got to listen to Rob Byrne every morning to find out which way to go to town. So the trucks are a problem. They break up the roads. They cause traffic congestion. But make no mistake, they don't. Their relative usage of fuel is not like that. They probably 10 to 1 in terms of damage they do, but they don't use 10 times as much fuel as my car uses. So I'm just using these to show you things are not so simple. Why is the whole world, why is the whole world looking at fuel tax, the alternatives for transportation funding? This is just an American one. Australia, England, as I said, the Minister of Roads in the UK is going to do this for the M25 around London. There's something wrong with us, our heads in the sands. I really believe there's a political background to a lot of these objections that are taking place. I mean, that's my view.
One thing that Wayne brought up is the lack of consultation.
I'm not arguing about that.
The lack of consultation, the awareness, public awareness, and so on. I mean, I'm going to pick on you now. So
sure.
Do you agree with that? I mean, or
yes, Chairman, I agree with that. In fact, many years ago, when I was sitting in Magdalene's position here at SAICI, we often had a challenge when there was a controversial issue, and then we had to get EXCO together or representation from EXCO to decide: are we going to say something? Secondly, we had to decide what are we going to say. Thirdly, by the time we decided who's going to say what, the event has happened and it's not necessary anymore. We as engineers have made many mistakes, and I think personally that is one of the biggest mistakes we made, is we have not communicated. As Wayne correctly said, we did not do all the billboards against the roads. Now I know I'm internal, and that's why I know 15 years ago we have already approved this, but it was not good enough. The challenge we have is we as professionals should start talking about this. Here's my learned friend talking about fuel tax. Fuel tax will not help us to change congestion. It will do nothing about congestion. We won't take people off the road and put them in public transport if we just use fuel tax.
How do you see the congestion issue being addressed? Let me put it that way.
It's a traffic management. Gerard knows a lot more about it than many people, so does John. They're both traffic engineers. It's a traffic management approach, of which costing or pricing is one tool. You don't solve congestion just by adding lanes and lanes and lanes and lanes. You have to manage. Roads are built, people think roads are built by engineers and they walk away from it. Roads are not only built. Apart from being maintained, they need to be managed, particularly metropolitan or urban roads. So tolling is one pricing approach. As Gerard said earlier, variable tolling, variable tariffs during the course of a day. So there are many ways, but you have to do it through a traffic management approach. And those two people are more expert than I am in this field.
I wonder if I could First of all, I think we've got to be very clear. We are not talking about tolling and congestion pricing, or with due respect, Gerard, the congestion pricing is something totally different from tolling. Congestion pricing was done, for example, in London. And what they did is they told every single road going to London, not just freeways, not just sections of freeways out of the town. They told an entire circle around London. If you are going to be using congestion pricing, and maybe that's something we can use these gantries for, by the way, in future, if we don't have to pay the toll, maybe we'll use them for congestion pricing. And that's when you also only toll those people in peak hours. You don't toll them out of peak hours. You don't toll them when it doesn't matter if they're on the road or not. So there is a very big difference between congestion pricing and tolling. The other thing I'd like to say about, there's been a number of studies done. In fact, the fuel levy could be used as congestion pricing if you make it high enough, expensive enough that people forced out of their cars because they can't afford to pay the petrol. That would be a way of addressing congestion pricing, but unfortunately that penalizes the poor. That means that the rich who can afford it get to use the roads, the poor who can't don't. So you've got to be very careful of that approach. The other thing about congestion pricing is that the studies show that people are, the price of fuel is very low, it has very low elasticity. And what that means is that even if we increase, the government decides to increase the price of fuel tomorrow, let's say they double the fuel levy, there would be very little change in the number of people using the roads, the number of people getting out of their cars. Be very, very little change because it is inelastic. People would grin and bear it. They would spend less on something else, but they wouldn't get out of their car. So you've really got to go, like London did, £10 a day it was introduced at, I think. It was really £10, that's over 100 Rand a day that you had to pay to go into London during 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Now, that is expensive. Now you start adding that up. You go into London 20 times, you're over 2,000 Rand a month. In fact, £10 is more than that. It's 140 Rand. So if you're going to do congestion pricing, you have to do it with big money. You have to make it really hurt in order for it to work. But so let's not confuse them.
As I thought about this, and with what government did at budget time, they said we're going to put a ceiling of 500 Rands or whatever the number is, 550. That's it. Having done that, to make that statement, won't people adjust their budgets to take the 550 and then just travel as much as they like, and therefore it just becomes inelastic anyway? Now, is that how do you, Gerard?
Chairman, I agree with that, and I do understand, and John is right, that congestion pricing and tolling is two different things. I agree with that.
They should be, but I think they might merge here.
But the point is, we have the unique opportunity to in fact use them for both purposes. Because how else are we going to get people supporting public transport? How else are we going to start getting better public transport if we don't do it that way? The challenge we have with fuel levies is that we have people living in Johannesburg in Rosebank who never uses the freeway. They work maybe also in Rosebank on Sandton, but they never use the freeway. It just doesn't make sense to ask them through fuel to pay for a road which is only used by people like myself commuting. Surely I need to understand what the options for me is, and I need to decide what my time value is of money, and then I need to decide to pay for that. So the issue of fuel is more complicated, and I don't know enough, or by far the same amount as John does. He knows more about it than I do, but the fact of the matter is we have to start talking about how can we, in not an ideal situation, we don't have an ideal situation in Gauteng, how are we going to achieve our objectives?
And before you do your closing argument,
That's virtually it, yeah.
I just want to go back a step, and I don't remember the words exactly in the judgment, but it was something along the lines of a reasonable person wouldn't impose e-tolling. Is that more or less what was said?
Can I?
And
If
now,
you knew the costs, yeah.
if you knew the costs,
you
and that's
understood the costs that were applied to e-tolling, and that you're asking the citizens to pay twice as much as they should for the road infrastructure, that's unreasonable. That's what it's all about. It's irrational, and unreasonable.
Now we have a challenge to that from government. Where do you, is this, you know, I do realise you've got to raise 10 million or 11 million for the legal process, and you've raised some of that. Is it going to be the biggest wallet wins here, or what's it going to be?
Well, we're hoping not. In fact, we should be going to government to tell them to fund this case, which is not fair. That they take your and my tax money to fight a case which is, and it's very sad that we're in a society that you have to go to court to get books delivered in Limpopo, or to get a policeman not to do his job, or to get an unreasonable tax on roads or toll on roads applied. Unfortunately, though, that's the society that we find ourselves. Unfortunately, the minister is not always right in their decisions, and sometimes they're misinformed. And the role of the judiciary and the role of the courts and business has to step up to the plate when they feel it is substantially wrong. And that's what's happened in this case, and that's what associations are here for. So the whole of the car rental industry sat up and said, well, this is so serious for us that we need to look at it and challenge it. And it was challengeable. And you don't often win cases like this against government. The last time was 5 years ago with Nuclex against the health minister on a pricing issue, similar thing. So, but that's how serious it is. Businesses coming to the party to fund this court case.
What I'm saying is we need, let's say, reliable, long-term, real cost.
Yeah.
Just to raise a couple of things that have gone through my mind whilst we've been talking. John is saying we shouldn't have any toll roads at all because it's not an economic way of building a road for the public, I think, trying to summarise it. Wayne is saying, well, I'm okay with toll roads between A and B, but I don't want them around the city. I think that's it. I'm trying to put...
I tend to side with John. That would be the purest way to go. We've got used to long-distance toll routes. It's a route we will take occasionally, and there's a good alternative, and not all the time. And I think we can stomach that. When you toll the road that you and I take daily to earn our bread and living, an existing road, by the way, which was just widened and resurfaced, it's a very, very different and ethical issue.
So we have those trains of thought. At what point does one become another? For example, I think what got stopped in this process, or earlier in the process, was the one in Cape Town, the Winelands, that got stopped. So it's a piece of urban and a piece of rural. Now, in John's thinking, it shouldn't be tolled at all. But in your mind, where does one become one and the other? I can clearly see why you're objecting to what has happened here. I can understand that.
Yeah.
But, you know, you start to move into these grey areas, such as the one in Cape Town, which the DA did say, we don't want it. But given the current constraints, how would you see that?
Mike, I suggest, and Malcolm's right, we need a moratorium on any more toll roads or tolls until we find the best funding solution for roads. We need to build roads. We have 140 billion rand backlog. And the way we ease congestion on these roads is not necessarily widening all our roads around. You build new ones, the PW9 and the 14, these still need to be built. And they also ease congestion. So, you know, urban tolling has crept into our environments, but only because you can still stop and start those ones at Bakwena, at King Shaka Airport in Durban, which, by the way, is paid for by the airport, but tolled anyway. I wouldn't put another toll gate up until we resolve this issue, but let's get on with building roads.
I'm not suggesting
Okay, all right. Malcolm first and then John.
I'm not suggesting a moratorium.
I'm suggesting...
Yeah, you're suggesting a moratorium. I'm not
the...
suggesting a moratorium. But, and just come to also say something about the whole issue of funding. And I agree, we need to look at it. I think we all seem to agree about that. But it's not easy in practice. I had 20 years when I was working with the Department of Transport, fighting the Treasury about money for roads. A question was invariably said to me, apart from the stupid argument about, you want all money from alcohol taxes to go to alcoholics. This was a bit of a puerile argument. But the other one was, I used to say, tell me, when I used to say we need more money for national roads and roads, you tell me now, which hospital and which schools do you want me to close or not build? You tell me which ones I shouldn't do to get you money for roads. I would hate to be in their position with our limited tax base